In this video, I'll walk you through the steps for installing PI Coresight 2016. And in the next video, I'll show you also how to configure PI Coresight, including creating the PI Coresight SQL database using the admin page. Now this is the machine where I'm going to be installing PI Coresight, and because it's dedicated just to hosting PI Coresight, you can actually see we've named the machine picoresight.pischool.int. Now, the first thing I want to do is navigate to the installation and administration guide in our PyLive library. And that can be found at livelibrary.osisoft.com. And I'm going to be doing the installation, phase 1, and we can see the first step is to check the hardware and software requirements. The first check is to make sure that this machine is running a supported operating system, and I can see that the requirement is Windows Server 2008 R2 SP1 or newer, and I'm running Windows Server 2012 R2, so I'm going to meet this requirement. And because I'm using a supported operating system, I'm going to meet these requirements here. And you'll also notice that I'm going to need a Microsoft SQL server, and that's to host the PI Coresight SQL database. And I'll have to have permissions on that SQL server to be able to create that SQL database. Looks like Microsoft SQL Server 2008 R2 or later is required, and I meet that requirement as well. I'm actually running SQL Server 2012 SP1. We can also see here that the PyAF server is going to be holding some Pi Web API configuration information. The Pi Web API is a component that's used by PI Coresight, and it's going to get installed with PI Coresight. Keep in mind, in order to set up the Pi Web API configuration, we're going to need to have admin level access on the PyAF server in order to make changes to the configuration database. There's also some requirements for minimum versions of the PyAF server and the PyData archive, and we can actually confirm that up here in the Pi system requirements. And I've confirmed that I have met these minimum versions for the PyData archive and the PyAF server. The final hardware and software requirement is to make sure that the machine that we're going to be installing PI Coresight is appropriately sized based on our hardware requirements, and I've already made sure to do this. Now that I know that I meet these requirements, the next step is to prepare the PI Coresight application server. I've worked with my IT team to make sure that I have the required ports open for PI Coresight. And I've also downloaded the PI Coresight installation kit from techsupport.osisoft.com to this machine. The next step is the add server roles and features. So PI Coresight is going to require a web server IIS role and an application server role if you're on Windows Server 2012, as I am. This application server role is optional if you have Windows Server 2008 R2. At this point, I do not have these server roles and features added, so I'll need to do this. But if you've already gone ahead and confirmed this, feel free to jump ahead in the video. If we look at the server roles and the features, we can see that the requirements are split into this convenient table depending on which operating system that you have. Remember, in my case, I am going to be using the Windows Server 2012. You can also see that there's some requirements and some recommendations. In this walkthrough video, I'm going to be doing both the required and recommended features. We can do all this in Server Manager. So I'm going to open up the Server Manager. And before we get started, I want to confirm that I am in the local administrator group on this machine. So I'm going to check that first. Tools, Computer Management. And C. Metzinger is my personal account. So you can see that I'm in the local administrator group on this machine. This is going to allow me to successfully do the installation. And I'm now ready to add roles and features. And this is going to be this server. Okay, so I need to do the application server as well as the web server. You'll notice that there are some requirements, and I'll add those. And then I'll hit next. So on features here, I will want to scroll down. And I will need to have the Windows Process Activation Service with the Process Model .NET Environment 3.5 and Configuration APIs. I'll hit next and next. And for the Application Server Role Services, .NET Framework 4.5 is required, along with Windows Process Activation Service Support, HTTP activation, and I'm also going to do the recommended web server IIS support, and hit next. Now for the web server role services, under common HTTP features, it's recommended that we have all except for this one here. So that looks good. Under health and diagnostics, none are required, but it's recommended to have these four: tracing, request monitor, logging tools, HTTP logging. All are required for performance. And under security, all are recommended. For application development, .NET Extensibility 4.5 is required, and I'm going to add the recommended ASP.NET 4.5, IS API extensions, and IS API filters. And down here under management tools, this is required here, and I'm going to add the recommended too as well. Okay, and hit next and install. Okay, great. I can see that the installation succeeded right here. And I'll go ahead and close out this and Server Manager. Now I'm going to return to the PyLive library. And you can see the next step after Add Server Roles and Features is Configure SSL Access. To be able to fully secure access to PI Coresight, you'll actually need to use a digital certificate that's obtained from a third-party registrar. And if you don't have such a certificate, you can use the installation program to create a self-signed certificate. Also keep in mind that in this installation walkthrough, I have just installed IIS. And that means that I am not running any other websites on this machine, but make sure to check out our documentation if you are in a position where you're installing PI Coresight on a web server that already has existing websites. You can see that phase 2 here is about creating a service account and setting up permissions. So we strongly recommend that you create a custom service account for PI Coresight. And I have worked with my IT team, and they have created a service account that I'm going to be using for PI Coresight. And I've made sure that it has the appropriate permissions to both my AF server and PI data archive, following these steps. And we'll double check those permissions at the end of this video as well. With that, we're ready to move on to phase 3, actually running the installation. So let me go ahead and minimize this and navigate to the location where I have my PI Coresight install kit downloaded. Remember, before you install PI Coresight here, you need to run the installation as an account that's in the local administrators group and that has write access to the configuration database in the AF server that you specify during the installation. I have confirmed that I'm in the local administrators group, and I have also confirmed that my account has admin level access to the AF server. So I'm ready to right-click this and run as administrator. I'm going to extract the files to a specific location. Okay, and we can see the components that will be installed. Notice that one of them here is Microsoft .NET Framework 4.6, and this is likely going to require a restart of the machine. So I've made sure that it's fine for me to restart the machine during this installation process. And you can see here that this is also going to have the PI Web API. That's the required component that we saw. And we will also, of course, be installing PI Coresight 2016. The setup may prompt you to close your programs, which I'll do. Okay, so the .NET Framework has passed. We've gone through the OSIsoft MS Runtime Redistributables, so I'll finish that and proceed. And finish. And we'll begin the PI AF Client 2016 installation. I'll choose to participate in our Customer Experience Improvement Program. And on the features here, if you want, you can also enable the Analysis Management plugin feature. This is the features, and you'll notice that if for some reason you don't have Excel on this machine, it will give you a message here just letting you know that PI Builder won't be installed because Excel is not available. And if you don't have the 32-bit PI SDK, it's not going to install the PI AF SDK.NET 3.5, but it will be installing the PI AF SDK.NET 4. And then I'll go ahead and install. And I'll hit next. And for the PI Web API 2016 setup, I'll accept the default location here and hit next, as well as the default application data folder. The installation will create a PI Web API admins group if you have the recommended option selected, And I'm going to go ahead and do that and hit next. And install. Then finish. And this is going to bring up the Pi Web API installation configuration. So I am going to participate in the Customer Experience Improvement Program. And this is where I'll need to specify the AF server that I have write access to the configuration database. And the Pi Web API is going to require this to store configuration information. So you can pick your AF server here. So this is my AF server. So once you have your AF server selected and you connect, then it will ask you for the name of the instance to create. I'm going to stick with the default and then hit next. Here you can specify the communication port number for the Pi Web API. I am going to keep the default. And in this case, if you have a certificate available, you can go ahead and select it here. And you'll notice that if there's no certificate selected, then a self-signed certificate will be created. So depending on whether or not you have a certificate available, go ahead and select it. In my case, I do not, so I'm going to use the self-signed certificate that's going to be created during the installation by hitting next. This is where you'll need to choose the account for the Pi Web API. Remember, it's our best practice to run it under a domain service account. So I'm going to go ahead and go custom, and this is where I'm going to be specifying the PI Coresight service account. And I'm going to be running the Pi Web API services and the PI Coresight app pools under the same account, which is our recommendation. And this is for the Pi Web API crawler service, and I'll make the same selection here because we want to run it under that same custom domain service account. Next, I'm going to keep the default URL for Pi Web API, and this has all the selections that we made, so I'll accept these and hit next. And everything was successful, so I'll finish. And the final part is the PI Coresight installation wizard. We'll need to acknowledge compliance for the specific information about cookies. And again, I'm going to participate in the Customer Experience Improvement Program. Then hit next. And you'll remember that I just installed the web server, so I only have the default website, and that's the selection that I'm going to make. If you had an existing web server, you would select your website here if you are not using the default website. And then I'll install. And then hit finish. And next. And you can see that I will require a reboot, so I will restart my computer now. Okay, and now that the machine has been rebooted, I can see that the PI Coresight 2016 setup was successful. And I'll close Server Manager too. So at this point, we've installed PI Coresight, and if we go to Services, we'll see our Pi Web API services running under our custom specified domain account. Okay, so we've got Pi Web API here, and the Pi Web API crawler. They're both running under our account, and I'm going to go ahead and start the Pi Web API crawler since that one wasn't started yet. Okay, so I have my services started, and I'll also need to make sure that my PI Coresight app pools run under this same account. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in IIS Manager. And under the application pools, we can see the two pools for the admin and service. I'm going to right-click and choose Advanced Settings to change their identity. Okay, so we have our identity, and we also want to make sure that this enable 32-bit applications is false. That was already correct, so that looks good. And I'm going to do the same thing for this one. Okay. And hit OK. Great. So now my app pools are also running under my custom domain account. And now that we all know that they're running under this domain account, it's really important to double check and make sure that I have the right permissions on my Pi Data Archive and my AF server to allow this account to connect to them. So I'm actually going to switch over and confirm that. So my Pi Data Archive, I'm going to make sure that I have the right permissions. By checking out Pi System Management Tools. And I can do this from any machine that I have Pi System Management Tools installed. Okay, and for this server, I want to look at security, and I want to look at identities first. And just double check that previously we had created a PI Coresight identity. And under mappings, I want to confirm that, okay, yep, this service account is getting mapped to the PI Coresight identity. And under database security, I need to make sure that that identity has read access on PyDBSec, Pi mapping, Pi point, and Pi user. So that all looks good. And on my individual Pi points, I'll need to make sure that the PI Coresight service account has read on point and data security. So I'll just check one of them to confirm that this was set up. Okay. So I also can see that the PI Coresight identity has read on point security and data security, and this will need to be the case for any Pi point that's viewed in PI Coresight. And I have just checked this for this one Pi point, but I know these changes were made to all of my Pi points. Similarly, I'll confirm that I have read access in AF for the service account with PI System Explorer. So I'm going to actually jump to my AF server machine. So again, I can check PI System Explorer from any machine that I haven't installed. Okay, and I am using AF Server 2.7 and later, which means I'm on the newer security model. So when I go to Server Properties, in Mappings, I actually have a mapping for the PI Coresight service account, and I've made sure that it is getting an identity that I know has read access to the AF server, the AF databases, and the AF elements that I want to be viewed in PI Coresight. So your security screen may look different if you have an older version of the AF server, but you just want to make sure that your service account does have the permissions that it needs. So with that, I have made sure that I have the right permissions and that I have successfully installed PI Coresight on this machine. In the next video, I'm going to be showing you how to configure PI Coresight, including the creation of the PI Coresight SQL database, and that's done through the PI Coresight admin page.